on the video any longer. Again, as we go through the session, if you have a question, please type something into the chat box or raise your hand, and we will watch for your questions. This is
Gabby. Have you raised your hand for a reason?
Yep, Gabby has her hand raised right now. Did you?
Oh, okay.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Okay. So we shall share the screen.
Share the screen, please. Yes. All right, so everyone should be seeing our shared screen at this point. Again, if you can't see our shared screen, or if, like last time, I kept rattling on and the pictures didn't match what I was saying, please let us know, because we did have a glitch last time where we were advancing a PowerPoint presentation, but it wasn't the correct one. So everybody, welcome to session 2. Thank you for coming back. I hope that the assignments and the tasks that you've had over the past week have not been overwhelming, but at the same time that they've challenged you a little bit and added to your knowledge base, what you know about action research. We're going to start today with a question. And we're doing this for a couple of reasons. Number one, we want to just check to make sure that everyone has their audio working, but we also want to make sure that perfect. I don't know if you could see that, but in true ACS style, we had the wheel of death just a moment ago, so I wasn't certain exactly what was going to happen, but it didn't look good. Okay, so what we want to start out with is just kind of a general question. What's the best thing that happened in the last week to you, either personally or professionally? In a moment, we're going to pull up a class roster because last week you didn't get to see what one another looks like, and even though these are just still shots, we are hoping that we pick pictures that represent you well. They've come primarily from our website or from other sources, so I can only assume that you have chosen your best photos to post in those places. And we're going to go through the roster one person at a time and let you respond. And so we're going to turn on your microphone one at a time and ask you to respond to that question. What's the best thing that happened in the last week, either personally or professionally? And we're going to start with Dawn. Go ahead, Dawn. I think everyone can hear you now.
Okay, so we move on to the next person.
Yep. We're going to try Denise because we can't hear Dawn right now. Denise.
Yes, I would say it was great to actually sit down with the person that I've chosen as my critical friend, at least in the beginning of this process, and to run some ideas by her and really get another perspective into my thought process, because I think I was going crazy at some point trying to figure out some of these things, but that was a good experience.
That's great. Thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Gabby now.
In the last weeks, I don't know, I think personally and professionally as well, because here in Doha we are a little bit more released because everything was solved out with our school. So yeah, I think that is the best thing.
Great, thanks, Gabby. We're going to skip by Jane. Jane is actually at a conference linked to her action research project that she's doing with CIM right now, so she's not with us this afternoon. So we're going to go directly to Kelly.
Okay, Kelly.
Okay, so we don't have any audio from Kelly, even though we've turned her microphone on. Let's go on to Lisa, please. Lisa, go ahead, and then we'll go back to Kelly.
Lisa?
All right, we're not getting the audio for Lisa. I don't know if any of you had audio from Lisa, but we're going to try Louise.
Do we want to go back to Kelly? Go to Louise.
Let's go to Louise first, and then we'll go back through people who we have not been able to connect to successfully. Louise.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Yeah, my nephew was born last week, so that's the best thing that's happened to me in the last week. And I guess professionally, it would be I've decided to stay at ACS for another year.
Oh, nice.
Fantastic. All right, Ruslan.
Hang on, just about to unmute you. Okay, Ruslan, ready.
Hello, everyone. Personally, my niece was born last week, and professionally, I had students lead the double lesson of TOK by themselves, and I was sitting at the back seat.
Wow.
Well, that's an ideal teacher role.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Ruslan. We're going to, actually, we don't have Simon with us this week again. We're going to try Tom. Tom, I know, sent us a message saying he needed to step out really quickly. Tom, are you there?
Tom, I think you've muted your microphone yourself. There's still a line across it and I can't unmute it. Oh, there you go. Hi, Tom.
Hey, should hear me now.
Yes, we can
Hello.
hear you.
It's all good?
All good.
Yeah, so personally, I guess today's my birthday and I'm spending it
Happy birthday.
learning about action research, so it shows my dedication, I guess. And then professionally, yeah, I'm starting to connect some of the things we're talking about to where I can go with this topic and guiding it a bit more, which is good.
Great.
Great, thank you for that.
Have a great birthday.
We're going to go to Shabana now.
Hi, and Latifa. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you fine.
Oh, finally, it's working all well with me. Okay. Personally, I think last week, me and my daughter, we finally scheduled a program to go and do some workouts to lose some calories. And I hope it's going to go well. And professionally, I'm very happy that I could collaborate a lesson from David, the novel that I'm doing for my class, with Mr. Trevor Furness. And that really went well. And I'm planning to have another class, and he's going to be coming to observe me sometime next week. So that's my excitement professionally, getting good feedbacks.
That's great. Thank you. We're going to go to Dee next.
Me? No, you're not, Dawn. I can hear you.
Right,
Hi, Dee.
Hiya. Can you hear me?
Yes,
We can.
Oh, good. Okay, because I could just hear Dawn then. I think personally, I have to say the sunshine. It's just lifted my spirits for the last week, and just makes everything so much better. And I think that links with professionally, not a specific incident, but over the weekend I realized how busy I am, and I don't wear that as a badge of honor, but I reframed it. So instead of thinking I'm overwhelmed, I just say I've overcommitted myself, and that actually somehow makes it much more manageable. So that's been a win.
That's great. Thanks for that. We're going to go back and try Dawn again. So in just a moment, we're going to unmute Dawn. Dawn, can you hear us now?
I can hear you. Can you
Hey,
hear
we
me?
can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so yeah, I was able to hear everybody. I just couldn't figure out. I don't know. It doesn't matter. So the best thing that happened to me was I had that epiphany where I figured out what my action research focus was going to be. So professionally, that was it. I suppose it's too late to say the best thing that happened this week was that we're going to move to Power School.
but and away from Keystone. I'm a week too late for that one, but that's okay. I'm going to say it anyway. Anyway, I'm very excited. Yeah, I don't know. That's it. So I too am overcommitted, Dee. So well done.
Thank you for that. We're going to try Kelly one more time. Kelly, go ahead.
Hi, Kelly. Oh, we can hear something, but it's not a voice.
Kelly's audio sounds a little bit like a windstorm rather than actual words.
Hello?
I think that we're still having problems connecting the audio to Kelly. Let's try Lisa one more time. All right, Lisa.
Hello? Can you hear me now?
We can.
Hello?
Hi, Lisa.
Hey. Hi. I was going to say the sunshine too, as well as Dee was saying. So it's been so nice to have the sun out. It makes me feel better and happier. The kids are all in a good mood. So it's been really positive over the last couple weeks to see a little bit more sun.
That's great. Well, I want to thank everyone for that. And again, part of what we're doing at the start of these first few sessions is actually trying to get ourselves a little bit more familiar with the actual software. And so the only person who we weren't able to connect with is Kelly, although Kelly did message us to let us know that all of her settings are correct. And we've checked settings here again. We're going to need to work on that a little bit in between this session and the next to see if we can iron out why we're not getting Kelly's audio through. For now, though, we're going to go on to the next part of today's session. I'm going to turn over to Latifa.
Right, okay, so talking about the software, I've just got a poll here to try and assess how comfortable you're all feeling with PowerSchool. So if you just bear with me, I will launch this poll.
Go to training.
No, sorry, go to training.
You may not be feeling very comfortable at all with PowerSchool since we've just adopted it.
Okay, so you should now be seeing the poll on your screen. If you could all just start to tell us how comfortable you're feeling with this. Okay, so yeah, 80%, that's correct. Right, so we've got 56% of you feel comfortable with it, 22% feel very comfortable, and we've got 22% who are getting there. So I'm glad that no one's selected the last one. So thank you for doing that. As the weeks go on, we will continue to iron out all the problems that we've been facing, so thank you. Okay, so if I could now ask you all to, using the chat box, to ask any questions that you may have, or raise your hand and ask me any questions that you may have about go-to training, and we'll either try and answer them right now if we can, or come back to you. Okay, so Louise is saying so she can't see us. Now, Louise, the reason that you can't see us is because we're sharing our screen and we're sharing the PowerPoint, which makes it in this particular tool you can only have one or the other. If we were just talking to you, then you'd be able to. Oh, you can still on the poll. Sorry. Okay. What is that? Okay, Tom's just come back. So
okay, there you go.
Okay, you should now all be able to see the PowerPoint again. Can you confirm that? Excellent. Fantastic. Right, has anyone got any more questions about go-to training before we move on to the next slide? Okay, right, and I'm going to move on. If you do think of any questions, you can always email us, or you can continue writing in the chat box, because the transcript will be there and I'll go through it tomorrow, so I'll be able to pick that up and come back to you.
So session 2, the question that we were addressing in this session is, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? And in preparation for today, I know that you have looked at some videos, you've read some background material, but you've also recorded some responses or thought about some prompts that were presented in the learning logs. And I want you to draw your attention to learning log 2.1 if I can. So if you need to pull that up or if you need to pull it out, however you've been recording on that, I want to spend just a couple of minutes kind of talking about the way that you approached that task. So next slide. So the first question that I want to ask is, how did you respond to the prompts on learning log 2.1? And if you could just say a little bit about whether it was easy to respond to those prompts, whether you found it challenging, and what was it about that task that made those responses either easy or challenging. And what we had asked you to do, just as a bit of review, we wanted you to describe a problem that was occurring in your practice. And we always want to start with a problem because, of course, action research is intended to be based in your practice. It's practical, and what you're developing is usable knowledge. And what that means is that the action research question you're asking is relevant and related to what you actually do every day in your day job. And so this learning log first asked you to think about a problem that was occurring, and then it asked you to state 5 reasons why you thought that was a problem. And then after that, 5 reasons why that was occurring. So if someone would be willing to raise their hand and just say a little bit about how you approached that task and how you found that task. Again, if you raise your hand, Latifah will unmute you and you can respond. So we're going to start with Dawn.
Okay, go ahead, Dawn.
Right, so you're asking how did I find the task? I think it was a really, for me, it was a really good way to break down what seemed like a daunting task. It just seemed as I was kind of stuck in my head trying to figure out all, what I was going to do for action research or what would be appropriate. It was like almost like the hamster wheel. I just kept spinning around and around and around. But once I was able to put it down on paper and articulate it in writing, it made it much more manageable.
Can I ask, did you actually then follow the learning log and try to come up with 5 reasons why that was a problem?
I did, yeah, but I talked with you first, Ben, right? And you told me to do that.
so what did you find about
I did. I went back. Sorry?
How would you describe those responses? So you came up with 5 different reasons why that was a problem.
Yes.
Were those all things that were obvious to you or would be obvious to other people, or did you find that as you challenged yourself to come up with more and more problems that kind of the quality of the problems changed?
Well, no, I think the quality definitely changed. I think, there's every time that you have something that you want to change, there's a lot of different factors that are playing into why is it a problem. So just identifying what the factors are, they were different. They're different factors. Some were quantitative, academic in nature. Some were emotional. Some are, the external supports that are not necessarily consistent across the board. Do you know what I mean? So there are lots of different, I could probably classify the problems into a variety of different areas, but for me it was the idea was to just pick one of those problems. That's what made it manageable. Seeing it all written down like that numerically, I was able to choose one of those reasons and say, right, this is going to be my focus.
That's great. One of the things that I'm hoping that everyone would have seen in those reasons is that there are some of the things that you recorded there that are things that are completely within your control, as based on whatever your role might be. But then there was kind of another category of things that were kind of outside your control. So they're within kind of your sphere of interest, but they're not necessarily things that you could change yourself. And I think, Dawn, that you referred to that there were some things that were bigger structural things that you just had to work within and be aware of, and not necessarily things that were in your power to control or address or even experiment with, possibly as part of your action research project.
Exactly.
What about the reasons for why those things were occurring? How did you find that process?
But listing out the reasons.
Yes.
Yeah, that was, I think the first 3 were pretty easy. The first 2 or 3 were pretty easy because I think that they were very obvious. But kind of after that, I started to struggle to like really, I had to really like dig deeper. And then I started to think, well, you know, that's part of this, the same reason, or that's like an offshoot of the same reason. So fix one, and the other one by default is going to be fixed.
Great. Kelly has her hand raised. Dawn, thank you very much for that. We're going to go to Kelly now with the same question.
Okay, Kelly.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Can you hear me? Oh, okay. I got a different headset. Yeah, I found the exercise useful, and I even used page 20 from the Nugent article as sort of a pre-writing, the questions they had there, and then I thought it was very useful, again, in deciding what do I actually have control over, what can I change, and what can I fix in a reasonable amount of time. And so yeah, did you have additional questions you wanted me to answer around that? Or
No, that's terrific. What about your experience of with each of those things, did you actually go through the exercise where you tried to list out the 5 reasons why it was a problem, the 5 reasons why it was occurring?
Yes.
And yes. Again, what did you find as you went from the first one that came into your mind to trying to come up with number 4, number 5? How did the quality of what you were writing change?
Yeah, just looking at my list here, I started out with some succinct statements, and then I did start to write more and more for each reason as I went down the list. And I think focus, at least in the reasons toward the end, more and more on my own responsibility and ownership of the problem.
Yep. Great. Thank you for that. I'm going to go to the next question.
Oh, Dee's go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dee, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I just want to say, in listing the possibilities of why it's occurring, it actually challenged me in terms of my biases, because I became aware of the ones that I didn't want it to be. Yeah. And I thought this could actually get in the way of what I might choose, what actions I might choose to take. So I found it really useful to have to actually list 5 and go and think to myself, oh, I don't want to write that one down because that's challenging me at a level that I actually don't want to know that. So, although I did go ahead and write them down. So I found that really useful to tease out what my own biases might be.
It's really great that you're beginning to actually ask some of those questions this early on in the process. One of the challenges of action research is that when you do action research, you're not just the researcher, you're actually involved in the project. And one of the things that we'll talk about at a later time is how important it is to always be aware of and challenging the biases that you bring, not only to how you set the question, but how you design the intervention, how you carry it out. It's impossible to be absolutely objective when you're doing action research because, again, you are the researcher, you are the participant, you put yourself in that role. But it is really important that at every step along the way that you are always thinking about the possible bias that you're bringing to what you're doing, and not necessarily excluding something as a possibility for doing it because it represents a bias, but understanding that the reason that you're choosing to do that is related to a personal bias that you have. Again, as we go forward, we're going to talk a little bit about the role of critical friends and colleague coaches in the action research process, and a big role that they will have is to help you identify when you're actually acting on bias rather than acting on evidence. So again, Dee, thanks for that. Really great that you're beginning to actually ask those questions this early in the process. We are going to now flip to the next question, which is kind of an extension to this one. So we heard from Dawn and Kelly and Dee. Based on what you heard, as well as what you recorded in your Learning Log Journal, I was wondering if this raises any questions about identifying a problem or need that you're going to address through action research. And I think that Dawn's, not Dawn's, but Dee's final comments actually about articulate an action research question in a way that you're actually aware of the bias that you're bringing to that question is a really key thing. But based on some of the other things that again, Dawn and Kelly and Dee just said, as well as having done the exercise yourself, what questions does it raise about identifying a problem or need to be addressed through action research? If you could go ahead and type that into your chat box, please.
So Louise has asked, is it a relevant and worthwhile problem? Dawn's come back with, I wonder if there will be others who believe the problem I identified will be worth looking at. I'm sure there will be, Dawn. Louise has come back saying exactly. So Dee's response is, without preempting the feedback from a critical friend, it would be the importance of the topic chosen. In the big scheme of things, how much does it matter? Ruslan says it raises the question of how effectively the data and observations inform the problems. And Gary is, I want to see if cooperative learning groups within the 7th grade classroom promote a deeper understanding of mathematics. Okay. Tom says that he went into this with the topic in mind, and when I was forced to think about the problems, it made me evaluate some of my ideas. How can I make it a concise question?
I think that those are all important and relevant questions and observations, and certainly ones we will be working through as we go through this session, the next session especially.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Shavana writes, how much can you understand the problem and solve it? One of the things we are going to find is that there are certainly limitations to action research, and kind of trying to figure out what those are is going to help us actually frame things that are realistic and doable in a certain amount of time. And certainly the stage for that is set with the research question. So the research question does become a very kind of pivotal part of the action research process, which is part of the reason why we are going to spend most of the session talking about that action research question. I'm going to go on to a couple more questions, and then we're going to do some activities just to kind of get us thinking about exactly a lot of the things that you just have recorded in the chat box. I have another question, and I'd like people to think about raising their hand and again sharing their responses to this. What did you learn by assessing the possible actions using the effort effect matrix on Learning Log 2? So Learning Log 2 asked you to brainstorm some possible ideas based on your question, because again, this kind of recursive reflection, identifying the problem, thinking about what some possible actions are, going back and refining the problem, this is all part of the action research process. But sometimes it's very important to have a more objective way to begin to evaluate the different activity options or action options that you come up with. And so what I presented on Learning Log 2 was that you think about some of those possible actions and think about if they were things that required a lot of effort or a little bit of effort, and if they were carried through, that particular activity would have a small effect or a big effect. And this is the typical kind of chart that, oftentimes you start with the low-hanging fruit, the thing that requires the lowest amount of effort but has the biggest effect, and you kind of work from there based on the resources that you have, or the size of the impact that you're trying to make. But if I can ask you to go ahead and raise your hand, and we have Ruslan who's raised his hand already. Go ahead, Ruslan.
So what I've learned from this matrix is that actually the actions that you perceive could be very effective may require extremely high effort. And then it challenges you to really critically think, is it going to be achieved within the time frame that is given? And therefore, it also makes you look at the some of the actions that are lower effort, high effort, but lower effect, because sometimes I think focusing our efforts and using this 20-80 rule in our efforts could bring higher results.
Great, thank you for that. We also have Shabana with her hand up. Go ahead. Shabana, are you there?
Hello. Yes, can you hear me, Ben?
We can.
Yeah. I feel that eye effort does yield a lot of big effects, because the more challenging and more hardworking you are with your projects or your research, the fruits of it is going to be really big.
That's great. Thank you. And Kelly, did you want to go ahead and say something as well? We're unmuting you right now. So go ahead. Kelly?
Oh, okay. Kelly's hand was up for Dawn's
Okay. All right. If everyone wants to go ahead and put your hands down so that the next time we come to a hand up exercise, we can see new hands. And we're going to go on to the final question before we shift gears a little bit. So in Learning Log 2.2, again, I asked you to think about the amount of effort that the action would take as well as the effect that it would have. But I was wondering if you could think about, and in the chat box, record some other factors or practicalities that would help you decide the course of action that you would take. So again, some factors that you would consider other than just effort and effect in making that decision as to whether or not something was a viable action. And go ahead and type those into your chat box, please.
Tom's asking previous research. Tom's saying previous research. Lisa's saying student buy-in or engagement with the topic that we look at, because it is about a student. Okay, cost of any resources needed. Yeah, having just worked on budgets, yes. Student benefit, effect on teacher time, teacher buy-in, whether there is relevant literature in the area you want to look at. Shabana talks about time and priority at work. Yeah. Professional environment, having a critical friend or PLC group, Ruslan. Ruslan works in Doha, where PLC groups are very common practice. And Denise is saying curriculum and time constraints issues come to mind. Teaching languages in a department where others do the same. Have to follow certain guidelines. Absolutely.
Great. And again, I think that we will kind of send out these chat threads as a document, and it would be really useful as you continue to work to go back and use some of these pieces almost as criteria or other things to think about as you work forward with your own research questions. So we are going to switch gears just a little bit, and I'm going to hand over to Latifa. In a couple of the articles that you read, there were some general kind of guidelines for how to identify a good action research question, in that the question should indicate whether or not the piece of research is manageable, whether it's important, if the question is stated in an open-ended way, and if the question is sufficiently focused. So I'm going to turn over to Latifa, and she's going to actually share with you some examples of research questions, and then ask you to raise your hand and talk about the extent to which that particular question, where there's evidence that it's manageable, important, open-ended, and focused. So, Latifa.
Okay, so I've got 6 questions. I'll ask them one at a time. So if you could raise your hand and tell me which of the 4 that you think it fits into and why. Okay, so question number 1. If I make a contract that will reward students for independent reading, how will this change the amount of time students spend reading?
And again, keep in mind, these are actual research questions that people have set for an action research project. And we want you to say, to what extent does the research question sound like it's going to be manageable, important, open-ended, focused?
So does anyone want to jump in with a response? Okay, we have a taker. D. I'm sorry, is it D?
Dawn.
I would say Dawn. Sorry. Okay, Dawn, I've unmuted you.
It's done.
Yes.
Thank you. So, yeah, so I would say yes, it's all of those things. Well, I don't know if it's open-ended. I didn't get that far. It's definitely manageable if you're going to work with just one class to start.
Yeah.
It's focused because we're looking at increasing the amount of independent reading time.
Mm-hmm.
It's important if that's what your priority is, if that's one of your goals, perhaps for your students. Yeah, so I'd say it ticks those boxes.
So, Donna, I know that in the reading that they talked about, kind of keywords you would look at or look for in a research question that would indicate that it was open-ended. And, I was wondering, do you see, is there one of the words, you said that it was open-ended, so what were you based on? Which words in the statement?
No, I said I don't know that it's open-ended. I didn't really think it through that far.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does someone else want to kind of weigh in on that? Do you think that this is an open-ended question? And if you do, why do you think that? Or if you don't, why do you think that?
Okay, Dee?
Oh, me now? Okay, sorry. I think it is because it only says how will this change the amount of time. So it's not pre-suggesting an outcome. It's actually leaving it open to see what will happen. If I do this, what's going to happen afterwards. So from that point of view, I would see it as being open-ended.
Okay.
Okay, does anyone else? Oh, yes, we do. We've got Ruslan who wants to make a comment. Okay, Ruslan?
To me, this question gets better after the words "how" will this change the amount of time students spend reading, because it is then leads to think that it is quite measurable in terms, because there's a specific indicator, time. Yeah. However, the first part, in terms of contracts, I'm not sure it is open-ended in that respect, because when researching the problem, this particular researcher may find that what is put in a contract more important than, or let me say, the attitude, the way it is presented, the things that are written in the contract may be more important than the way it, the means of communication. So what I'm trying to say is it may not be a contract, and it may turn out not to be a contract in the end. However, in this particular question, the researcher puts a limitation that it will have to be a contract.
Yeah, Russell, that's a really good point. And one of the things I think that you will find and everyone will find as they develop their action research questions is that I'm certain to this person that this seemed rather focused when they started. But as you said, they may actually initiate this project and quickly find that things around the actual contract, I mean, what that contract is may change. But that really, that speaks to the recursive nature of action research, because that then generates a new question, or it generates a modified question. And that is completely within the frame for action research. That's something that shouldn't be seen as a flaw or as a shortcoming. That's genuinely part of the process, that will be refined over time. One of the challenges in developing your question is to actually anticipate some of those things that you might actually find need to be changed just a short way into your project. And so to the extent that you can kind of discover those things in advance, the more kind of your first research cycle ends up being smoother. But there's virtually no action research project which is a single cycle and doesn't have that recursive, now we have a new question, or now we have a modified form of the question. So, Ruslan, thanks for that. We're going to go on to the second example.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question is, why are my students lazy? So is this question manageable, important, open-ended, focused? So raise your hands. Okay, D.
That sounds to me like something you say on a Friday afternoon when you've had enough and you need to go home. For me, it's not even a question of being manageable because you don't even know really what you're asking. I mean, it's an open-ended question because there's no definition about what you want to find out. I actually even have a problem with the word lazy because it's a very judgmental, subjective word. So from that point of view, there's no way I could count that as an action research question.
But I think that you're right that even though it has all those other problems, it is open-ended.
Yes. And open-started probably as well.
Okay, thank you, Dee.
Yeah. Let's go on to the next question.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so if students do their homework, will they learn more? So again, think about it. Is it manageable, important, open-ended, or focused? And it could be all of those things. Okay, we've got 2 people. Okay, Tom. Tom?
Okay. Yeah. I think it could turn into a good action research question if it was more focused. So when you say, is it a focused question? It's not quite yet, but it could maybe turn into one.
Okay.
How would you change it, or what could you add that would make it more focused?
Instead of maybe will they learn more, will their grades improve or something like that.
Okay, so
will they be more
really defining what you're going to measure in the end, because will they learn more is a rather vague kind of idea of what you're actually looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah. It could be more focused also on the front end as well, perhaps, yeah?
Yeah, like the type of homework they're doing maybe.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, thank you.
Ruslan, do you want to add to that, or do you have some other ideas? You're ready to go.
Okay, I actually have something to say about the previous and this question. There's a common theme, and that leads from what you've just said. Because action research is a tool for professional development as well as all the other things, I don't see it as a big problem if a teacher, and I'm a young teacher, so I think I understand that perspective. If a teacher starts with the question, why are my students lazy? Because I don't know about everyone else, but I came into profession thinking some of those questions. And as well, I did think about, so if students will actually do their homework, will they learn more? And it's coming back to the nature of recursive nature of the action research, as you said, that can improve the questions and the quality of the research. So speaking about this particular question, I did my action research in physical education based on homework and learning. And so I think it sounded more like how did knowledge-based, I don't remember the wording exactly, but I was looking at the giving rules-based, knowledge-based home assignments, and then seeing if I could see students applying those rules in lessons during the practice, playing team games, such as volleyball, basketball, and others.
Yeah. Great. And Ruslan, you actually make a good point that as an action researcher, young teachers are going to be asking questions that are very different in terms of how much they represent understanding of teaching. So their questions will be very different than a person who's been in the profession for a longer period of time. And this, even though that previous question was stated as, why are my students lazy? For a new teacher or someone just coming into the field, it's possible that may be the word that best describes what they're actually observing. For someone who's been in the field for a while, they might begin talking about, why do they have low levels of engagement and motivation, which physically look like lazy, but again, action research is something that can be practiced by people at all levels of experience in the teaching profession, and the vocabulary and the way that we describe questions will change with experience, and so that's again a natural part of action research. I think we're going to do one more of these, and then we're going to shift gears. Shabana
just wants to share something. Yep. Okay, Shabana.
If the students do their homework, the question whether they will learn more depends on the quality and the quantity of work that you provide the child. Basically, if a teacher is under the opinion that giving 3-4 worksheets is what the child is going to learn from doing the homework, it really doesn't prove, because the quality of the worksheet or the quality of the task matters for the child to learn more. So I really don't believe that homework will let the student learn more. So I think the research question that I would focus is, it is important to do homework, but then it depends on what kind of a task that you are providing the student with. And then it can also be open-ended, and we can also focus on the kind of work that you can provide the student with.
Yeah. So Shabana, it sounds like the way that you might have modified that question would have been to say something like, how does the quality and quantity of homework affect academic performance in class? As a way of
That's right.
something that was very vague and begin to improve the focus of the question.
That's right, Ben.
Great. Thank you for that.
Okay,
so let's try. Let's do the next one, and then we'll skip into the next section.
Okay. So the last question then. If I use a project-based approach for teaching the geography of Egypt, how will students' enjoyment of learning and understanding of geography change? Is this research question manageable, important, open-ended, or focused? Ruslan, you've got your hand up. I'm not sure if this is from before or... So I'm going to...
Oh, he's put his hand down.
Oh, you put your hand down, okay. Okay, so we've got Denise. Go ahead, Denise.
Well, I think this reflects a bit about what I seem to be struggling with in terms of figuring out the second part, the enjoyment of learning, the understanding of geography. Not only do you need a quantitative way through assessments or something versus a base assessment before of figuring out if they're understanding it more because of a project, but also you need, obviously, in some of the readings we read about surveys or focus groups or questions to ask the students that will focus on the enjoyment of learning. And so it seems to be maybe too open-ended and not as focused in terms of how to figure out whether it did have an exact effect on what the teacher wants to know. And it's hard because, even when I did my matrix, I'm trying to figure out what is going to have the best effect, what is manageable for me to measure, how, there's so many factors that go into this that it is difficult sometimes to make sure that the research question is all of these things. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. Shabana, thank you for that. I'm sorry, Denise. Thank you for that. Yep. Thank you for that. I agree that one of the things you want to think about is how much are you going to try to measure in your action research piece. And if you're trying to link one activity to both enjoyment and understanding, the number of assessment tools and the range of assessment tools you will need will be much greater than if you were simply looking at how does project-based learning affect enjoyment, or if you went a different route, how does it affect understanding of geography? So understanding, when the scope is too big for you to manage or whether the scope is right is really important in a question.
Okay, got Dee and Shabana. So just okay, Dee. Dee?
Oh, well, actually, Ben just said it, really. For me, it was you could drop out for teaching the geography of Egypt because it seems that like the content could almost be irrelevant, between using the project-based approach and their enjoyment of learning. So I think it's really important. I mean, the students' enjoyment of learning is one of the most important things that we can support and encourage. But I just felt that teaching the geography of Egypt was a bit didn't really add anything, and it was kind of taking a very small piece of content and trying to apply it to a very large concept.
Yep. Dee, thank you for that. I would just say that one of the things to keep in mind is it depends whether or not your action research project is trying to produce usable knowledge or generalizable knowledge. And again, the distinction between those is usable knowledge is something that you're going to use again in your own practice, or someone else who is teaching geography at that same grade level might use. By widening the scope of the question, it indicates that you're actually trying to develop more generalizable knowledge. And oftentimes that will take a much bigger kind of research project in order to produce something that will be relevant across disciplines or even across other topics in geography other than the study of Egypt in this case. So while there's no harm in being this specific, as you ask bigger open-ended questions, you do need to be aware that really it does shape the research process and just kind of the scope of what you're taking on and what you're trying to demonstrate. Oftentimes, action research, the most typical ones, are aimed at creating usable knowledge, which is knowledge for you, the teacher, to improve teaching and learning, not necessarily generalizable knowledge that you could give to someone in another school teaching, even if they were teaching the same subject in the same grade level. So again, just kind of keeping in mind the uses for action research and the results from action research and how you hope to use those results will help you shape your question.
Let's just take the last comment from Shabana. Okay, Shabana.
Project-based approach for teaching geography is important because children really enjoy project-based research questions because IT is it integrates IT, and these days children are quite excited to work with laptops and computers or iPads. So any project-based approach for teaching not only geography of Egypt, but I think any subject is very important. So the research question I would focus on is important.
Great, thank you for that. We did have a couple of more of these that we were going to do, but I think that we are going to move on now to the next section so that we do finish up today within the time frame that we've set for ourselves. So I want to now direct you to Learning Log 2.4, which you may have used to record responses, or you may have just read the case study and not actually recorded anything on 2.4. But I want to just, as a reminder, in this particular case study, we had a teacher named Lisa who was using teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling, or abbreviated TPRS, which is a teaching strategy. She was using it in her middle school Spanish class. And one of the things about the strategy is that it's highly engaging. It gets kids very kind of active and engaged in learning. But what this teacher found was that she sometimes lost control of her class as the class's enthusiasm led to unproductive behavior. One of the other things that was pointed out is that the teacher herself has a somewhat negative attitude about this particular teaching strategy because at certain stages it does become quite messy and can be difficult to manage. And so I was wondering if, based on reading the case study, if Lisa was to design an action research project to improve the way that she delivers this teaching strategy, teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling, what kinds of problems should she be concerned about or interested in investigating? And again, if you would go ahead and type some of those problems into the chat box and we'll read those out.
Shabana says she should set specific classroom rules at the beginning of the lesson.
Okay, so one of the problems or concerns that she might be investigating is classroom rules and classroom management.
Okay. She would want to be mindful of how her biases might affect the research.
Yeah. So she wants to think about the attitudes that she has toward the curriculum, and I'm assuming in this particular case that this is an adopted curriculum that she's obligated to use, which is why she's taken it on.
Yeah. Rustin says the first problem she should be concerned with is the need of students and the suitability of the teaching method described. She has seen that it is not easy to apply that in her context. So now questions should be directed towards why is this the case?
Yeah. So she might have questions about how she might modify this teaching strategy or even alternative teaching strategies.
Tom says, I think the problem she was concerned with was more to do with the structure of the lessons, not necessarily the content.
Yeah. So it had to do with this teaching strategy and the strategy itself. Yeah.
Yeah. And Rustin goes on to say, this will lead her to identifying the root of the problem. She could also investigate
how it works in other settings.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. And then he says, will the attitude towards the activity change for both student and herself if she makes the expectations more specific? And Japan says the lessons needs to be more child friendly. And Lisa says that how to keep students excited but not getting out of control. Yeah, that's true.
All right, I'm going to move on to the next question, which is related to this question. And again, this is a raise your hand, and we'd like you to give a verbal response. And the question is that if Lisa came to you, what steps would you suggest in order to get a clear picture of the problem she's facing? So if she's identified problems that have to do with behavior, students' enjoyment and engagement, academic performance, in this case in Spanish, the use of this teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling teaching strategy, if she came to you and she presented you with this problem, what steps would you suggest that she take to get a better idea of the actual problem that she's trying to solve? So again, if you go ahead and please raise your hand and we'll call on you.
Okay. Go ahead, Shabana.
Well, if Lisa came to me, I would talk about the problem that she's facing, what steps that she should take, I would say, regarding behavior. I think you in a class, you have students of all mixed calibers. So I think people who comes out with the bad behaviors are the ones who have not understood the lesson, or someone who's already bored of the lesson. So you need to, I would definitely ask her to have differentiated lesson plans for those classes so that every child is involved and you have worksheets or whatever tasks for different calibers. And to make the enjoyment, maybe have some activities in between, group work, discussions, so that it is not a very monotonous lesson, so the child gets engaged and interested in the lessons. So I would ask her to include a lot of activities wherein there is interaction between the students in the class.
Okay. So certainly by asking the teacher to consider alternative ways to approach that lesson could get her thinking about the problem that she's facing and how she might solve it. We have Dee. Go ahead, Dee.
Yeah, I'd be interested to find out her perception of what's going on and the levels of disruption, and whether that's as valid as I'm not putting this right, but whether that sort of stands up to observation. And I'd perhaps suggest that she have a critical friend come in, sit in the back of the room and do an observation, noting students' engagement and students who were off task and distracted and so on, so that she could perhaps get a more accurate view of what the noise and her perceived distractions are about. Because if the kids are on task, it might mean that she actually needs a readjustment of her expectations in the classroom and what that active learning looks like. So I'm kind of quite interested to see, yeah, whether what she's perceiving is an indication that it's not working or not working in the way she would like it to.
Dee, that's great. And I know that as teachers, you all know, but certainly one of the things to think about with your action research question is that oftentimes it is important to kind of share what you perceive a problem to be with a friend. And when possible, if you could actually have that person come in and observe you in your class and provide feedback, that will help you shape a much more effective, not only a more effective question, but help you actually have a different way of thinking about the actions that you would take as part of the action research project. So great, thank you for that.
And we've got Denise. Okay,
Denise, go ahead.
Yes, I agree with what Dee was saying about having an observer, but also I know because when I do teach, language classes and people get really excited and we either do singing or acting or, it becomes a very lively class. At some point in the article, she mentions that a child was not really understanding her question, and it had to do with that she had not gone through frequent sort of comprehension checks throughout the lesson. So I think that if she does more of that, and if she would make sure to check, once in a while, especially for those learners that she might fear are not really comprehending well enough, and if everybody seems to be, knowing the answers, or it was about verbs and new vocabulary that she was introducing, then just because the class is a bit rambunctious when learning does not mean they're not really learning the content and what they need to be acquiring, the skills they need to acquire.
That's great. That's great. So looking at assessments. Oh, I'm sorry, we're going to turn you off because we're getting some feedback from your computer. So looking at the actual assessments, the formative assessments, to actually understand if this approach is having an effect. And then kind of better understanding whether or not what she's perceiving as a distraction or as an unproductive behavior really is distracting or unproductive. I'm going to throw in just a couple more things that would be relevant in this case, but also would be relevant to you as you're thinking about your action research project. Oftentimes, one of the things we don't think about is actually asking students. In this case, she could actually ask the students if they actually perceive that their behaviors are disruptive, if they're actually perceiving their behaviors as just being an expression of the enthusiasm that they have for the participatory activities that she's using. Another thing that you could do is actually talk to teachers about this cohort. How does this cohort respond to these kinds of tasks in other classes? And that, again, could help you understand why this behavior is happening in your class if you perceive it to be unproductive. So again, I want to thank you for all of those. I have one more exercise that is going to take a couple of minutes. So I want to introduce it rather quickly so that we have enough time to do it. In this next exercise, I'm first going to introduce the exercise. I'm then going to talk about who you are paired with. And then I'm going to give you about 10 minutes for the exercise. But let me go ahead and explain it first. What I want you to do using your chat, and you're actually going to do a paired chat so that when you go down into your chat box where it has two, right now it is entire audience. But in a moment, I'm going to ask a specific person to set up the chat with another person. And I believe it's only the first person that needs to set it up, and then you'll be able to chat back and forth. We're going to try this out because this is the first time that we've done this. What I want you to do is to share your research question with another person who's online live with us this afternoon. And you're going to do that by first typing. So the first person is going to type their question into the box. And then I want the other person to look at it and maybe ask the other person some questions about whether or not it's manageable, important, open-ended, and focused. So again, I want the first person to type their question into the box, the other person to respond by making observations to the extent that they think that the question is manageable, important, open-ended, and focused. If we have Dawn is going to be leaving us at 4:50, so we're going to try to get to this rather quickly so that you have a couple of minutes to work on this together. In the next slide that I'm going to show you who you're being paired with. So for this exercise, Dawn is going to be paired with Louise, Denise with Ruslan, Gabby is going to be with Tom, Kelly is going to be with Shabana, and Lisa is going to be with Dee. So if Dawn, Denise, Gabby, Kelly, and Lisa will go down to the 2 box and pick the name of the person that you're paired with. Yep. And if Dawn, Denise, Gabby, Kelly, and Lisa will type in their action research question, that will get you started. Again, Louise is going to respond to Dawn, Bristol's going to respond to Denise, Tom to Gabby, Shabana to Kelly, and Dee to Lisa. And when you've done that, then reverse roles and Louise, put your question in. I'm going to give you a timed approximately 8 minutes. So after 4 minutes, you're going to change. And I know, Dawn, that you're probably going to leave Louise before we're done with this. But again, I'm going to put up the next slide. And if you have any problems making this work, please email us on the chat box. Yes. So here is a reminder of the task, and go ahead and get started, please. So Shabana, you are still emailing to everyone. So again, below your chat box where it says 2, if you click on the box and pull down the drop-down menu
select Kelly.
And select Kelly. So 8 minutes.
Ruslan, you're also chatting to everyone at the moment. As are you, Louise. We've just seen what looks like a response from you, so I'm not sure what's going on there. Over.
So we have less than 3 minutes left now. If you are done, can you raise your hand so that you know that you're done?
That's done. Okay, done. Yes. Okay, it's just gone. Bye. Lisa, I know you've got a bus to catch too, so thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.
If you can go through rather quickly.
Yes, Dee, if you're done, just put your hands up so we can see. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, we have about a minute left now. So
yeah.
if you
just want to wrap up. Oh, well, yes, Tom. We were hoping that both of you would have the opportunity to share your questions, but we are running short of time now. So if you haven't done, then maybe you'll get an opportunity offline to do it. Thank you. That's really...
Okay, at the risk of cutting short some conversations, we are going to move on and close the course for this week. So again, as Latifa said, if you didn't get a chance to share it fully with another person and you'd like to get some feedback, if you'd like to contact that person using email afterward, or if you want to contact Latifa and I to ask us some additional questions, if we go to the next slide. If you do have some additional questions about setting an action research question, it would be great if you could send those directly to Latifa and I, and we will try to help you out with that. It's going to be very important that you have a research question for session 3 that you feel fairly confident about, because we're going to be going on to the next stage of the research process, which is thinking about finding information in the research literature about the topic that you have picked. So again, it's going to be very important that you come to session 3 with a research question that you're comfortable with. It doesn't have to be perfect. We are going to revisit it. This is, again, recursive reflection. We will go back and re-examine it. But you need to have a question that you're confident enough to begin thinking about what type of information are you looking for to provide the background to that question.
Okay, so just to close this session out, as we did last week, there will be a checkout survey for this session. So I'd really appreciate it if you could all complete that. I will send that straight after the session closes tonight. And then if you could email me and let me know that you've completed it, I will then distribute the session 3 materials. There was a question last week about the way that we're sharing things. We are looking at putting things on a different platform too, so it's there as an archive and one place for you to go to, but that hasn't been set up yet, so just please bear with us.
Yeah. As you kind of finish working on this week's material and before you move on to the next, again, I would encourage you to think about the things that we talked about in this session. You may be using this learning log as you go along, but the summary learning log, the learning points, is just a great opportunity to consolidate your learning in a series of bullet points or short statements. The final thing, and again, Latifa has already mentioned this, that we have recorded the session, and we will be posting the recording in the GoTo training area as well as the chat thread. We encourage you to contact us between sessions if you have questions about your research question or what you might want to do with it. As a reminder, I know that some of you might be thinking about submitting a proposal for a CIM project for next year, and our deadline of April 15th is quickly approaching. So if you think that you have an idea for a CIM project and you'd like to talk about that, again, please contact Latifa and I at any time. Thank you all very much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next week at the same time. Have a good evening.
Bye, everyone.
Just give it over for a minute for people to put in.